Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we're hearing from the Stein line, which is Marc Stein and Jake Fisher. They're reporting that the Atlanta Hawks, who are looking for a president of basketball operations after firing Landry Fields and promoting Onsi Saleh. So they have two high-profile candidates, you could say, for their president of basketball operations vacancy. Former Denver Nuggets GM Calvin Booth and former Sacramento Kings GM Monte McNair. Two, you would say, differing philosophies that could help the Hawks shape their future under new GM Onsi Saleh. So before we start today, let's break it down, and I would like to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section. Which one would you want to choose? I still think if they could get Bob Myers, that's who you need to go for. However, let me hear your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And if you enjoy the content, hit that like button and subscribe. It'll help out the channel a ton. So Calvin Booth technically has a championship DNA, even though he was the guy who replaced Tim Connelly, who went to Minnesota after building the team and just giving it to Booth. And the whole reason is allegedly because Booth was willing to not pay people, as the ownership wanted to not spend money, which is something the Denver Nuggets have a problem with. However, Booth isn't the architect behind the roster for the championship team, but he did serve as GM until April 2025. And he's known for being a good drafter and talent evaluator. Now, he didn't build the roster from scratch, but he did identify and acquire certain pieces that did allow them to go on multiple deep playoff runs. He would be an advocate for youth, which is a big problem that Calvin Booth and Michael Malone had. Malone wouldn't play the young guys that Booth had, and I like all the young guys that Booth brought in. So he would prioritize that, developing young talent alongside star players, and that's something that they need with Jalen Johnson and Zachary Rissache in the fold. Now, there was reports, and I was told that Michael Malone and him didn't speak for 2 years, and they clashed over playing time for young guys versus vets. And if the Hawks value harmony, that's something worth noting. Post-title roster management was something that I think was evident. He made questionable free agency moves. The bench depth after the championship run was not replenished, and he leaned too much into the draft picks at the expense of immediate contention. So his fit in Atlanta would be bringing a championship pedigree with a developmental focus that would help the Hawks' young core. If Atlanta wants to build sustainability while keeping an eye on contention, he could be, in theory, the right voice for the room. Now, Monte McNair is a Daryl Morey disciple, analytics maestro who helped revive Sacramento. He took over the Kings front office in 2020, ended their 17-year playoff drought, even earned Executive of the Year in 2023. He does have a data-driven approach, which reshaped Sacramento, but his exit was allegedly mutual, but we know it was messy. I think he did a solid job of building the team into a playoff squad. However, I don't know how much it was Vivek Ranadivev or Monte McNair being the one who forced this team to make a series of double downing on offense and no defense. I have to give some blame on Vivek just telling the GM to do what he had to do, as I heard a story that Wes Wilcox, when he was with Atlanta, Wrestler told him to sign Dwight Howard and that he was fired if he didn't, but he knew if he signed Dwight Howard, they weren't going to make the playoffs and he was going to be fired. So he knew regardless of the situation, he was going to get fired. So that could be, it could be like that. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he did trade for Sabonis and he did draft Halliburton, but he did trade Howard. There was a lot of things there. Either way, he's a guy who's been known to build teams with analytics, maximizes roster construction, and that's something that could help optimize Trae Young's prime. And he wasn't the one who fired Mike Brown, but is he just a pawn? Is he just a yes man? And the Kings never got past, just breaking into the playoffs. Does he have the ability? I think he's just a systematic guy. will help the team make smarter long-term moves, especially if they're wanting to balance winning now with future flexibility. So Calvin Booth, championship pedigree, youth developmental focus. Monte McNair, probably Daryl Morey, cheap, analytic approach. So look, I think they both bring their cases, and I just both think they're crappy options. And this is my take. If the Hawks are serious about winning a championship with Trae Young while keeping flexibility around Johnson, Risache, Bob Myers should be their top target. Championship resume, elite leadership is unmatched. And if Myers is off the table, John Hammond on the Magic would be a strong plan B. He's got an eye for talent, and he already did this with Jeff Weltman. He's a good, kind of mentor for Onsi Saleh. And I would not go for Tim Conley's not coming here. If they got Tim Conley, I'd be shocked. So if he can't get any of those guys, I would rather go before Booth or McNair, Sharif Abdul-Rahim, who offers stability and some deep NBA ties, and he could be valuable if Atlanta pivots towards youth and asset accumulation. So bottom line, looks like both McNair and Booth are strong candidates, but I think Atlanta should aim higher if they really want to maximize the era with Mr. Trae Young. I think it's a lowbrow move if you just say, oh, yeah, we're just going to go with Booth or McNair because the other guys were too expensive. When you reported earlier that you were willing to shell out whatever it costs for an executive to help you win now, seems like you were just lying to us. And that's kind of the biggest problem I have with all of this, is that how serious is Wrestler? This is a guy who's doesn't pay the tax, is really stingy as an owner, and he acts like he's all in, but he's really not. And that's my biggest problem with him, is that he's fake, and he's acting like he wants these guys, but then he goes and interviews the two guys who got fired that I think everybody knows should not be considered as legitimate options, in my opinion, if you were actually serious about building a championship team, which you told the media you were. So I know a lot of people in Atlanta aren't Wrestlers fans, but hopefully they're just, doing their due diligence and maybe just actually being responsible and being like, all right, we're going to go and talk to everybody who could potentially be an option for us and go from there. And if they did do that, I would be happy, but you also would be shocking me, or would be shocking me, Mr. Wrestler, just doing something that I wasn't expecting him to do. So that's basically going to be it for me. Hope you guys did enjoy. Comment, subscribe.